My name is Kathy. Given name is Catherine Marie, and I'm from Mobile, Alabama. I was raised in a very devout Catholic family. There are 3 nuns and a priest in my immediate family. 2 of the nuns have the same name, Sister Catherine Marie. So I was the first girl born after that and was given Catherine Marie. I had a really good foundation growing up in the Catholic schools and the Catholic Church, so I am very blessed for that. I met one of my many friends, Donna, my freshman year in high school. Donna was part of a very, unfortunately, a very dysfunctional family. Her father being an alcoholic and, a brother, several brothers, I think, were on the drug scene. And she and I would just sit outside, actually on the street curb, and talk, sometimes for many hours about it. And so that particular day, I was walking home from school, and I stopped to check on her, and her brother answered the door, and of course asked me to come in, or didn't ask me, just slung the door open, and I didn't realize that my friend Donna wasn't home. And he obviously was on some type of drug, and at which time this unexpected rape happened. And as a result of that horrendous act, I was expecting a child. I didn't say anything to my parents, and I was just trying to figure out what direction I needed to take. And my parents were divorced when I was 11, and I was, at the time that this happened, I was living with my father and my stepmother, and I went to visit my mom at her apartment. And by that time I was 3.5 months. And my mother, who had 7 pregnancies herself, was just taken back. She immediately called my father with her suspicions. So my dad and my stepmother took me to a doctor. In our Catholic home, a lot of things were very hush-hush, maybe closed, not shared openly. My parents never asked me what happened. I had a good friend, Sue, who her parents were very close to me, and I shared it with them. They were very loving and comforted me and held me and just with me through a lot of it. We had a wonderful counselor at the Florence Crittenden Home, which is a home for unwed mothers, and that the Catholic Social Services worked with closely. And we had weekly sessions that we talked about adoptions, keeping the child, and there were several girls who chose to keep their babies, which those of us who decided to give up for adoption, we kind of separated ourselves from that group because it was real hard to interact with, knowing that they're going to keep their babies, and am I doing the right thing or the wrong thing? I knew at 16 I could not provide for Catherine. I knew my parents could not help with this. So it really was the right choice for me, but it took a lot of counseling on the premises to make this choice. It was one of the hardest things, if not the hardest situation I've ever been in. But fast forwarding, it was the best thing I ever did. For the 9 months I was carrying her, I could not, I really couldn't see myself handing this part of me to someone else. It's a very complex foreign issue because you've not been in this situation, or I had not been in this situation. So it is a very difficult thought process to go through, because you are a big part of this child even before she comes to the world. So I guess my response to that would be, you have to look past that and say, what is the future of this child if she stays in my home? What can I provide for her? What am I going to do with my future? And how am I going to go on with my life? So you really have to get out of your own self and get past that to the future of the child. What's really best for the child? And in my case, and in a lot of people's case, you come to terms with saying, I want her, I want to keep her. That's the selfishness part. But on the other hand, I can't provide for her. I want better for her. I know that this is the right thing to do. And there are women who may know that. In fact, there was one in the home who would tell us over and over, I don't know how I'm going to provide for her. Or in this case, it was a male child, but I'll find a way. Well, I couldn't go in with that questionable future. Maybe I can provide for Catherine, maybe not. I had to do what I thought was best. And I strongly encourage those, especially at a young age. Adoption is a wonderful, wonderful thing. Of course, now they have open adoptions where you can go and be a part of the adoption. You can even go through and select the parents for your child. That was not the case in the 70s. They were placed by Catholic Social Services and they profiled the parents, but the birth mother had no part of it. Which leads to the day that I was in court to sign the papers. It was a very negative experience for me because the judge made me feel like I was doing something wrong and kept asking me, is anyone here persuading you to do this? Do you understand you will never, ever see this child? Because in this state, those files will stay sealed and you will never be able to find her. In a very derogative way, and you know, being 16, you're just a child. And but he did at the end give me the option, which to my surprise, he said, I'll give you a few minutes to see her. She's in my chambers. Which I had not seen Catherine in the hospital. They wouldn't allow it. They wouldn't even tell me if I had a boy or a girl. I did learn it through a nurse, though, who one night came in the middle of the night to take care of me. She was an older nurse, and she went outside her boundaries, and she leaned over and whispered in my ear 2 words I'll never forget. And she said, she's beautiful. And that's how I found out that I had a little girl. So anyway, I made it through that, and I made it through court, and I did go to the judge's chambers and looked at her and said a little prayer. Prayed she'd have a good life. I carried a lot of anger, bitterness, rejection. A rape victim feels very guilty, as if to say it was my fault for putting myself in that position. But as years went by, I fully understood that, you know, this wasn't my fault at all. Her birthday is March 5th, and as March 5th would get closer and closer, I think the anger and the bitterness grew. But on a softer note, I often wondered, you know, what kind of parents did she have? Did they provide? Did they love her the way I would have loved her? Is she even alive? I just had a lot of thoughts running through my mind that I wanted answered. And as long as this bitterness and anger, in my opinion, grew, the longer I was going to have to wait for the answer. I do not believe that I carried the anger and resentment towards my own children. I truly don't. Now, I did sit them down when they were young teenagers and shared the story with them, simply because I wanted them to know that to make wise choices, you're not immune from these things happening to you. So I was able to sit down and talk to them about that. And looking back, that was really part of healing, because before you wouldn't have talked about it, and I didn't want to talk about it. I just wanted to erase that sentence in my life or close that chapter, but I knew that I couldn't, because that part of my life was there. And so I don't really think that the anger I had towards this one individual, I kept that in a separate department. I was able to, but looking back, had I received or gone to the right counselor, maybe my first marriage would have been successful. And at the age of 36, I was invited to another church, and it was just a whole different avenue for me, and that's where I began my real journey with Jesus. And I joined wonderful Bible studies, disciple classes, learned about this loving God that I had separated from my everyday secular world, and then I got saved. And so 5 years went by, and I learned all about forgiveness and the freedom that forgiveness gives you. And I love the Lord. He came into my life, and it was a huge transformation for me. And what happened was, and I was single at the time, raising 3 young daughters myself, so I went to singles Sunday school class and had been very involved for about 4 of those years, from 96 to 2000. So that puts it 25 years after this horrendous act. And I was sitting in Sunday school one day, and you'll have to understand, on the second floor there were 5 Sunday school classes going on of singles. And I went into this singles class that I had been active for 2 years. And actually, it's funny because I was running about 5 minutes late. I always liked to sit on the front row because I could see the board better. But because I was late, I was taking the last seat in the back row. And my singles minister, Rick, occasionally, not all the time, would say, it looks like we have a lot of visitors here. Let's just go around the room and tell our names and why we're here. And if we're a member, just kind of tell a little bit about yourself. So I was on the back row, and I knew it would be a while before it would get to me. So I was flipping through the Bible to get today's lesson. And all of a sudden, this individual sitting next to me, literally elbow to elbow, says, "Well, my name is Bruce, and to be honest with you, I really don't know why I'm here, because I've never been to this Sunday school class. I belong to a church across town." And I literally froze, because first of all, I recognized the voice after 25 years. But what you need to understand is that my closeness with God and His love and my desire to have a pure heart, I was so at peace. Now, shocked, but had so much peace in my heart. And I knew it was him, and I turned to look at him, and I said, "What did you say your name was?" Well, let me back up. It was my turn to say who I was and how long I'd been there, and nothing would come out. I couldn't even speak, and my singles minister, who I was very close to, knew something wasn't right. So fortunately, he went to the next person. And that's when I turned to Bruce and I said, "What did you say your name was?" And we only had name tags with first names. He said, "Well, I'm Bruce, and I'm just visiting." And I said, I wanted to verify I had the right person, which I knew I did. I said, "Did you have a brother, Carl?" "Oh, yeah." "And a sister, Donna?" "Well, yeah." "And your father was an alcoholic?" And by then, he was backing up. Like, "Who are you? And how do you know all of this about me?" And I said, "Well, I'll tell you what, I'll meet you after class, because I don't talk during someone's lesson," and I just thought it was a little rude to carry on the conversation. So he's a little on the hyper side, so he was insisting that I tell him who I was. And I just kept saying, "I can't right now. I was a friend of your sister's, Donna." So halfway through the class, I'll never forget this, he says, "Oh my gosh, I now know who you are." And his eyes welled up with tears. And he said, "I hope you have forgiven me." So it was really a huge moment for me. And I said to him, "I forgave you a long time ago." So I was so excited, because I knew in my heart this was sincere. This wasn't, "Oh, it'll work out, blah, blah, blah." No, I truly forgive you for your actions. How can my Heavenly Father forgive me for my sins if I can't forgive you? So long story short, we did go to lunch that day, and it was great. It was wonderful. It was, "Tell me about your life." Now, and I won't get into his life, his past. All I really wanted to know was the present. I was like, "You are so heavily into drugs and you are in church." And he was excited about his relationship with God. I could tell it was sincere. This is not a story made up. And I was excited about my journey. God did miracles in both of our lives, and now we were ready to go one step further together. I had no bitterness. And all I can do is say I could not have done this on my own. I give the glory and the credit to our Heavenly Father, and then secondary to my beautiful friends at my church who helped me in the healing process of this. We stayed in contact for about a year. This was back in 2000. And after that, he kind of went his way and I went my way, and we agreed that if we ever heard from her, that it would be fine. And also, if we didn't, it was God's will, and we had to accept that. All the negative parts of the story prevented me from thinking the positive of, maybe there will be a day. And my roommate, Teresa, at the Unwed Mother's Home, beautiful girl who I have remained friends with for these 34 years. We have been close. Her son found her 10 years prior to my reunion with Catherine. Teresa encouraged me every phone call, pray about it, pray about it. It's going to happen. And I would almost get resentful and kind of angry that, hey, you're with your son. It's not going to happen. Quit saying that. And Teresa's a prayer warrior. And so I think that she was a part of this. And so I started believing, and of course we all know our thoughts produce our actions. So as long as I was having negative thoughts about this reunion, it was producing negative actions. So I had to change my ways of thinking. And like I previously mentioned, when I got to the point of my relationship with God and fully engulfed in His love for me, I had a sense of calmness and peace, but the greatest is the freedom of forgiveness. And that's when I was placed next to her father, and we went together and opened her file, or we didn't open it, but we put information in it. And then 9 years later, talk about patience, 9 years later we get the call. And as soon as I came to terms with it, I had an enormous amount of peace in my heart and true forgiveness for what happened to me. Oh, this is just wonderful. Within months, I received a phone call from Catherine. I'll never forget it because I was home by myself, which I'm never home by myself. My husband and I together have 6 daughters. So someone's either running in or out, or my husband who works shift work. I was there by myself, and I came in and the blinker on the voicemail was going off. So I walked over there and I pressed it thinking it was either going to be my mother or my husband or one of my daughters. And it was this beautiful voice. I just kept hitting replay. I just couldn't believe it. It was wonderful. The only thing is she never told me her name. So I had to call her back and go, I'm this woman you called. I can't even call you by your name. Which was another just beautiful, beautiful part of the story when she told me her name, and her name is Catherine, and it's spelled exactly like mine, which is just unbelievable because her parents had no access to the birth certificate. So jokingly I said, well, I like your first name, but I want you to know that I named you when you were in my womb, and I named you Michelle. And she said, that's okay, that's my middle name. What? So God has ways of performing little miracles in His network, and I was just part of it. I think we talked a long time. It was exciting. It was unbelievable for me in one sense, and then it was believable in another sense because I know that with God all things are possible. And I immediately thought about my dear friend Teresa in Hattiesburg. It's like, she was so right, that I needed to get to this point in my life, and I know that God was preparing me for 2 things. One, for the experience with Bruce in Sunday school. Had it been any earlier than that, it would not have turned out like that. And then the second thing that God prepared me for was this phone call. So there was a lot of excitement, emotions, and we talked about when and where we would meet, or if we wanted to meet. And 2 days later we met on the 9th day of July 2009. Well, we met at a little restaurant downtown, Spotted Tea. It's a little unique restaurant, and I had gotten there 10 or 15 minutes early, and I just kept looking out the window thinking, well, where is she? No, that's not her. That can't be her. She's with 2 or 3 other people. And I was not expecting Catherine to bring anybody with her, but she did. I think one of the social workers. Well, one thing that's very memorable and a treasure to my heart was when Catherine came through the door. First of all, she came straight towards me as if she knew all along I was her mother. And the most beautiful thing she's ever said to me was, she grabbed me and she said, "Thank you for giving me life." I'll never forget that. She thanked me for giving her the gift of life. And then I told her, "I've loved you for 33 years. And I have. And mother's love can never be fully defined. It's all treasured in the heart. Many times I thought previously, if I ever meet her, am I going to tell her what happened? It's going to be painful, but I think I need to be honest with her. So I really had a hard time sharing with her how she was conceived. But I felt that to be honest and open with her, if she asked, then that's the way to go. Because I wanted her to also understand the beauty out of what happened to me was her coming into the world. And I'm proud of her. So when Catherine called me, I felt like it wasn't my place to call him, especially under the circumstances with me sharing with Catherine what happened. So I let that be Catherine's choice to locate him if she so desired, and if she didn't, which I do believe, I don't want to speak for Catherine, I do believe at first she wanted nothing to do with him. And my reaction and my response to that was, Catherine, it's your choice. And in time, I hope you find healing like I did and forgiveness, because I want you to know your biological father and to know him as he is today. He's truly a friend. During that week, we went to a Catholic Mass, and the three of us, and after Mass, I felt in my heart that Catherine needed to hear me tell her biological father. I had already told him previously I forgave him, the 9 years prior to this event. But I felt it was necessary for Catherine to hear me tell him. So after Mass, we went to the altar, or to where the candles are lit. I'm not real sure what area that's called, but we lit a candle in honor of our reunion, in prayer that we stay connected in a loving way. And I again announced to him that I have truly forgiven him. And that was a very special moment, I believe, for Catherine. I believe for all three of us. So we left church, and we have some beautiful pictures on the premises, which are very meaningful to me. And this kind of started our new journey as a threesome. So that's my story of how forgiveness can free you. It's a wonderful, wonderful gift that God has waiting for you. So I encourage young adults, young girls, even men who may have a similar experience, or if you're carrying anger or bitterness in your heart towards anyone. It might be parents, it might be co-workers. I strongly encourage you to lay this at the foot of the cross and let the Lord do his thing. He will fix it.